The second thing that rattles around in my mind is, are we truly focused in this state on our competitive fundamentals? Because just like that British air flight regained its altitude, we're going to regain our altitude as well. And the lay of the land is going to look much different. And the question for us in this state will be, are we a safe haven for capital? Are we still seen by the business community and the financial markets as a place where capital can be parked? Because we all know that capital ultimately is a coward. And it's going to flee wherever it perceives risk there to be in the marketplace, and it's going to find a safe haven ultimately. And through the years, on and off, we've sometimes been a safe haven, sometimes not. But when the storm dissipates, as it will at some point, are we going to be seen as a safe haven? Are we going to be a competitive business destination that will make the likes of Lane Beatty and others proud as they look out over our business community? So some remarkable things are occurring that I think we all need to be aware of as a backdrop to our state's growth. Number one, we're the fastest growing state in America. We're all aware of that right now, which I think says something quite good about who we are and how we positioned ourselves, but it also carries enormous challenges in terms of how you pay for that growth longer term. Number two, there's been significant expansion in Utah's employment base, and I thank Jason and Lane and many others who have been part of that. 26 months straight of new job announcements, which is pretty darn good given the challenging environment in which we find ourselves. So consequently, Utah's unemployment rate, while it's likely to go up, sits at 3.7%, while the nation hit 7.2% this morning. Three, Utah's housing market is weak, and we're likely to hit wind shears as we continue, but we still have a foreclosure rate that is half the national rate, which is something that I think we all need to be aware of. Four, our international exports grew from $7.8 billion last year to $10.8 billion this year. And let us not forget that $1 billion in exports generally is thought to create 22,500 jobs. So as we export more and more and engage more with other countries of the world, as we have very aggressively in recent years, this is a job creator like few other things. And let us not forget the fact that we as a state continue to win accolades as the analysts and the pundits look at us for who we are. I thank the legislature and others for their work in having us designated the best managed state in the nation by the Pew Center, which I think is a designation that every state in America would love to have. We're only one of a handful of states that maintains a AAA bond rating status, which is something that gives us a preferred cost of capital in the marketplace, for which we should be very grateful and proud. The Kauffman Foundation has honored us again as the most dynamic economy in the United States, which says something. I'm sure Mark and others would tell you it's great to be number one, like the Utah Utes, but everybody wants to be seen as having that sense of dynamism, because that's the innovation, the creativity, and the entrepreneurship that undergirds everything else as we try to manage our economy. Forbes just released a list showing Provo, Salt Lake, and Ogden all in their top roundup of places to do business in the United States. The Beacon Hill Institute cited us recently as the most competitive state in America. The list goes on and on and on. So we've got much to be grateful for, but certainly a lot of work ahead of us if we're going to stay in the game and if we're going to deliver on that second point that I mentioned, which is answering the question, are we as competitive as we can be as a state? So we sent out a little survey to about 2,000 plus businesses recently just to see what was on their minds. And we have heard loud and clear from the business community that there are some things that are more important than others. And I would tell you just in closing that we're going to focus over this next year, indeed through the legislative session and beyond, on the things that matter most to you in the business community, because you understand what it takes to maintain a competitive state. And let me just run through a couple of those things. We heard loud and clear on the need to have more in the way of technical training in the state. And we convened a group over the summer months. We called it the 21st Century Workforce Initiative, in which we brought together public ed, higher ed, workforce services, public-private sectors, and other organizations to figure out what our deficiencies were in appropriately training the next generation of 21st century workers. And we've got a lot to show for it, and we will soon be convening our first ever 21st Century Workforce Committee that will allow this state for the first time ever to have seated around the same table people from higher ed and public ed and workforce services and industry to speak a common language about what we're doing right and wrong about preparing the next generation for the workforce. I think this is going to be a very, very important exercise. Number two, USTAR, Utah Science, Technology, and Research Initiative, is yielding very important results for the state. We are bringing brain power from other destinations into our state at the higher ed level that is putting us at the forefront of things like personal medicine, which, to my mind, is going to have a revolutionary impact on the way healthcare is delivered in the years to come. And ground zero is right here in Utah. Things like new energy technologies and the innovations for tomorrow in terms of cleaning up our act as a country, all coming out of our state thanks to the work of USTAR. So let me just say that as it relates to the budget and what we have turned over to the legislature, I would ask simply that we approach the budget in the legislative session in a steady and a thoughtful fashion. I understand that the legislature will always look at it a little differently than our office. That's just the way government is. We have two different branches that have two different worldviews. But I think given the progress that we have made in the last 3 to 4 years, 23% increase for teacher compensation for new teachers, 20% increase in general for all teachers, huge gains for something as important as recognizing those who are so important in our communities, our educators. These are things we just don't want lost in a longitudinal haircut. We want to make sure that we very carefully select those areas that are critical to our long-term survival and competitiveness in the state. And I also would say, as it relates to the budget, that we not shy away from creative thinking, being a little more creative than we have been in the past. And that might mean a little bonding here and there that we can afford to do as a AAA-rated state.